Hello and welcome to the latest edition of Lunchtime Learning. I'm delighted to be joined today by Sam Olliver. Sam Olliver is the Regional Property Management Director for the South East Coast of the Lomond Group. So Sam, thanks very much for joining me. How are you?
Yes, very well, Stephen. You?
Yeah, I'm excellent, thank you. So tell us a little bit about yourself. How did you end up in agency?
It's a bit of a funny story, really. So I never really set my sights on getting into property. I went to sixth form and was doing a Saturday job at the time. My mum got me a job at Fox and Sons, and I just wasn't really getting on at sixth form, and called my boss at the time and said, "Look, if I leave and go full time, would you have a position free?" And it kind of stemmed from there. And 20 odd years later, here we are. So it's a bit of a funny one, really, getting into it in the first instance.
Okay, so tell us, what did you start doing at Fox and Sons, and obviously you've done incredibly well to get to where you are. So tell us a little bit about that.
So I started off in sales. So I spent 2 years doing just general sort of viewings, bits and pieces like that. And from there, I sort of transitioned into lettings. And I kind of stuck, to be fair. I think lettings has definitely been my bag. So I spent most of my career then being in the front office part of lettings, went through sort of negotiator roles, and sort of transitioned then onto a sort of assistant manager, lettings manager, and then sort of snowballed from there, really.
Brilliant. And then into property management.
Which I've really enjoyed, actually. I think property management seen as being a very sort of reactive type department, so it's been really good to bring some sort of front office elements into it.
Okay, so let's talk about that. So going from sales to lettings and then actually assistant manager to manager, how did you find that? How did you find from going to actually being managed to managing? How did you see that transition?
Yeah, so I mean, I've always been interested in sort of personal and professional development. So for the longest part, I've been reading books, and I think, like anyone, you sit there and you think, if I ever get the opportunity, these are the things I would replicate, and these are the things I would do differently. So the assistant lettings manager role kind of came about. Someone went on to maternity leave, so it was kind of sort of just a chance luck, really, to just have an opportunity to kind of sort of show what I could do. I think as far as being managed to getting into a management role, I think it's been a journey. I think there's been lots of things that I haven't necessarily done very well that I've learned from. If I was to go back, I'd probably do them differently. But yeah, I really enjoy it. I think for me, the main point of getting into management was to be able to help other people who work alongside me come up through the ranks as well. Because I think, it's a bit of a glass ceiling for most people when it comes to progression. So it's really key for me, particularly in the role I'm in now, to make sure that, I work with people to try and, where possible, get where they need to be. So that's probably been my experience, I would say, so far.
Okay, so coming back, you said you would do things differently now.
Yeah.
So what were the lessons that you learned then that you would do differently now?
I think, like anything, you have ideas in mind and you steam in and you apply all those changes, and you don't consult with the people that are doing the job day to day. And I don't think I'm perfect at it now, but I think I'm certainly in a better position now where, if there's a thought in mind in terms of rollout, I will go and speak to the people that are doing the job and just float it first and foremost. So I think that's probably one of the main things I've learned. You roll something out and you haven't got the buy-in. It's you're set up to fail before you even start.
So again, for people that are watching this that are maybe going from assistant manager to manager, how would they go about getting that buy-in?
Again, I think it goes back to probably seeking what the sort of general pains are, I guess, with the team. I think if you sat there and had a bit of a round robin in terms of where everyone thinks things should be, and I think that goes for anyone that's been in the business for a long time to someone who's just started. If you sit down and fully understand what they think would make a difference, I think you're probably in the right realms then. And even if you're bringing something to the table that they haven't thought of, I think like anything, if you chat something through and they have input, there's certainly a lot more buy-in to start with than there would be. So that would be my recommendation, would be, yes, bring your own ideas into the mix, but sense check them first. And be prepared to be told, actually, that's no good, Sam. And, sort of to go sort of 180 on it and go a different direction. So,
okay, so let's talk about property management. So you said that you brought in lessons from the front end to the back end. What were, or what lessons have you learnt that you've managed to put into the property management side?
So I think one of the things, one of the guys that works for me, when I first went into the property management sector, he was very keen to shift into a more sales role. But once I'd explored as to what the reasons were, it's that reactive setup again, where there's no incentive so much when you're in property management. There's no buzz, no one's air punching because a tenant's rung in because their boiler's broken again. So I think there wasn't scope at the time when I joined to have KPIs, and as much as it sounds very corporate to have KPIs, I think the ability to have those and then incentivize those KPIs makes all the difference. So we've rolled out quite a few different KPIs that are centered around response times to clients, but equally some more proactive elements in terms of income. So I think we've really got the best of both worlds now, as we've got a really nice setup where we're looking after the management of properties, but equally the team are incentivized to drive performance, and we've had a really good year this year as a result.
Fantastic. You get a lot of complaints on property management.
Yes.
You get a lot of angry people, whether it's tenants or landlords.
Yeah.
Again, dealing with complaints, dealing with the stress of it. I remember going back to my time doing lettings for, I think, I don't know what happened, but we had nobody doing lettings for 1 month, and it was the busiest month, August and September. And I think from memory, I did 40 lets, and we didn't have any coordinators at the time. So I was organising absolutely everything. So doing the references, organising the contract, organising the gas certificate, etc., etc., etc. And boy, did I get stressed. How do you deal with that? How do you overcome that? What tips can you give?
So, I mean, there's always going to be someone who's got a gripe of some sort in the nicest way. And I think, the important thing is for them to be listened to. But equally, what we're looking at the moment is making sure that those things don't come about in the first place. There are some instances like you've described where they're unforeseen. You have to make the best of it. But I think most of the issues that come my way, I think it's not because the team have done something wrong, it's because they haven't explained the rationale behind it. They might have a quote that's £200 more than what a landlord might expect it to be. But that price is correct. But they haven't explained that, look, Mr. Landlord, the prices have gone up. I've got 2 quotes just to reassure you, this is a fair price, just chatting it through. So I think it's similar with all kinds of setups, really. We've got different systems. I think it's hearing them and explaining things, I think, is the main thing, really, is just making sure you're explaining the rationale behind why you're doing it. And equally, if you're having a conversation with someone and you said you're going to get back to them, make sure you get back to them on a date and time that you've committed to. So
100%. So I'm a letting agent, and I've got let-only landlords, and I want to convert those to fully managed. Any tips you can share on that?
Definitely. I think, I'm not saying that the managed service hasn't been valuable for the last 5 to 10 years, but I think particularly with the renters reform on the horizon, I think the landscape's changed dramatically. And whereas it was something that, in the nicest way landlords could wing to a degree, I think all the more now it's so important for a landlord to have an agent behind them who's keeping up to date with legislation changes, who knows the ways and means of going about things. And it's equally about knowing the right way of setting the tenancy up to start with. So that would probably be what I would say at this particular moment in time. And it's a valid point. I think most people are feeling it. We've had a lot of people ring in about it, because it's such a sort of hot topic at the moment.
Okay, so one of the things that I suppose I personally think, and this is on the sales side as well as on the letting side, is I don't think unless you're a professional landlord, you really understand what's going on. You know, and I know there's loads of accidental landlords out there, and I don't think people are really aware of all the different consequences they have, you know, if they don't do the gas certificate, etc., etc. As an industry, what can we do better to start educating not just, I suppose, landlords, but tenants, buyers, sellers about the process? Because I'm, you know, from everybody I've been speaking to recently on all those different sides, I really believe that the consumer, in a nice way, and I mean this very respectfully, doesn't really understand, you know, what you do, Sam. You know, you do an incredible job. Letting agents, property management, sales agents do an incredible job. And yesterday I was doing a training session, and almost, you know, I said to everybody, what do you do for reinvestment in your services? You know, because most people think as a property manager, the only thing you do is maybe you put the property on Rightmove, it lets, that's it, nothing ever happens. It's really, really easy. Yeah, on sales, there's 54 things you do from instruction to completion. And I'm sure on lettings, it's going to be double that. So, you know, what could we do to educate people? Because I actually think, and again, on property management and the same on sales, we're too cheap for everything we do.
I agree. I think there's not enough, you know, if you look at from a marketing perspective for most businesses, they're always pushing the front end. They're always pushing, you know, all the standard stuff. We do an EPC, free photography, all the stuff that, you know, over the years has been known to landlords. It's not changing any views. But I think as far as the day-to-day and all the legislation changes we're talking about, I think there needs to be more information going out to landlords regularly to that effect, just to talk through, you know, things like the renters reform as a classic, the EPCC rating that's on the horizon. But I also think, you know, if I take what we're doing at the moment in property management, we've got a planned works and refurbishments team. And, you know, most of the time that we're ringing a landlord, the first thing they say is, what's wrong? You know, they think something's up when you're ringing them. Whereas we've tried to pose it in such a way that, you know, we're going out looking at these properties. It shouldn't be that we're only ringing these landlords when, like I said earlier, the boiler's blown up or something needs replacing. It's also looking at the spec and making sure it's kept up to date, you know, because tenants give notice and, you know, you've got the classic situation of a void period. Landlords are then waiting for a tenant to obviously move in. If the kitchen bathroom's not up to date, then they're competing against others who may have their sort of kitchens, bathrooms updated. So we're trying to really sort of promote that within to landlords, which has been received very well. Similarly, in terms of rent review, you know, tenants are quite happy for a brand new kitchen or bathroom to be put in whilst they're there. And they're quite happy to pay a slightly more inflated rental figure because they're getting something back in return. So, you know, I think in answer to your question, I think it's showing the proactivity end of things as well. Yeah, if you are just literally facilitating a tenant and going to a landlord and saying, look, tenant said your boiler's blown up, what do you want us to do? It's almost tantamount to a sort of messaging service for not actually delivering any value. So I've kind of gone around the house a little bit there, Stephen, but I think that's kind of where I'm going with it. So I think it's showing the value and the proactivity that can be there within a property management setup like we're doing.
Okay, I couldn't agree more. What's your take on landlord evenings and landlord events?
Yeah, I think they're really valuable. We did one probably going back, 2 or 3 months now on the renters reform at the time, just to kind of give them a sort of flavour as to what we knew at that moment. And it was greatly received. Some of the team that obviously got up and spoke. There was lots of questions flying about. We weren't sure how engaged the landlords were going to be, but that was really good. And we had existing landlords. We also had landlords that we don't currently deal with. So it was a really good opportunity to meet with them and just sort of chat through kind of the upcoming situation.
Okay, so what advice would you give to agents who aren't sure about doing landlords? How would you go about setting one up, a landlord's event?
I think, I mean, I didn't organise the last one, so I can't speak to the arrangement side, but I know my colleague who set it up, I think, you've got to look at the various different elements that are going to be important for a landlord. It's very easy just to throw a few people into a room and hope it's going to have the impact. So he'd really thought about what are the key elements that a landlord would want to know at this moment in time. So I think it would be, probably the best thing would be to get some kind of survey out, find out what landlords are what their sort of pain points or the things that they're unsure about are, and then build it backwards from there. And I think that way, if you know kind of what the general themes are, you're not setting something up that no one's going to turn up to and no one's going to be engaged with.
Yeah, and actually just piggybacking on what you said, I think there's a couple of landlord websites, 118 Property and Property Tribes. And if you're ever struggling for topics to talk about, there you go. And also I think Landlord Action may have some topics as well, where people are saying, we want help on this and this. And I think that gives you a great range of subjects to speak about because it's topical and relevant at the moment. And I think you're spot on. The Renters Reform Act and the EPC are something that's very, very relevant to people. So, start educating them and start putting them in local Facebook groups as well, because they can see that you are the local lettings expert and going from there.
Definitely.
Okay, so building a team. Okay, so how would you go and recruit and find the right people to make, what makes a good property manager?
Do you know what? We've gone for a little bit of recruitment recently because we've expanded the team. And, I know each person has their own ways and means of going through recruitment. I do look at CVs and I do take them in. I try and skim through them and not get too in depth, because I think we can all agree, from my perspective, I've hired some people that have been fantastic that CVs don't necessarily reflect. And equally on the flip side, I think it's all about the organisational element. I think anyone that's got a really sort of keen eye for detail, organised, communicates well, I think everything else can be forgiven a little bit. If you have someone start and they're not 100% in tune with property management at this point, I think landlords are quite happy as long as it goes back to that communication thing. As long as landlords are communicated that they're new into it, I think they'll be the key elements we look for. I think as far as the team's concerned, I think, it's a matter of trying to it's not about getting sort of a cookie cutter setup and just keeping to the same standard. If you came and looked at our team, we've got a nice variety of ages, nationality. And I think that really helps because, landlords warm to different people, and it's nice to have a nice wide range, diverse team. So, yeah, I would say that probably would be the elements. The key elements for me for recruitment would be those three core points.
Okay, brilliant. I'm conscious of time, and I'm very grateful that you've been on. So a couple of final questions. At the start, you talked about training, and you talked about books. So are there any particular books that you would recommend to people to get?
Definitely. I think going back to what we were saying earlier with communication and getting buy-in, I think start with why. Simon Sinek would be one that I would highly recommend. If people can see what the end result is behind as to why you're going about doing something, then there's a lot more buy-in from the start. So that would be my recommendation as far as the team's concerned. I think there's plenty of others as well. I'm trying to think of one that names escaped me. That would be probably my key recommendation at this moment in time, would be Simon Sinek. Start with why.
Lovely. And what do you do to continuously improve then?
So whether it be podcasts, books, YouTube, I tend to just do all three, to be fair. I've always got a book on the go. I think it's really important, particularly when you've been doing it for a while, you can get stuck in a rut. I feel like you've kind of got where you need to, and you don't then further your education. So I'm forever learning and unlearning, because I think, like I said earlier, things change. If you stay the same, then I think that's where it's sort of a quick route to things failing, really.
Brilliant. So Sam, if people want to get hold of you, how do they do that, please?
Yeah, so I'm on LinkedIn, That's probably to be fair, my sort of key sort of social network that I use. Yeah, that would be it. I would say probably, yeah, just reach out on LinkedIn, drop me a message, connect. So
fantastic. Well, look, thank you so much for your time. Thank you for being a great guest. Thank you for sharing so much gold that's going to help a lot of people on lettings and property management. Really appreciate it. And thank you all for watching and listening. And please like, subscribe, tag a friend in agency so they can get the benefit of this. And I look forward to seeing you all the next time. Thanks very much, Sam.
thanks, Stephen.